Greetings, Beyonders, and welcome back once again. In the last couple months, Beyonder's been to a bunch of different conventions, and we've done some podcast interviews, and we keep telling people that Beyonder is super customizable, but people aren't exactly sure what that means. So I thought I'd do a couple of videos demonstrating what we mean when we say that Beyonder is so customizable, and maybe show you some of the intricacies of how the system works that might help you add some depth to your game. There are a ton of different aspects of Beyonder that you can customize, but I thought I'd start with something simple. We're going to make 6 different powers. They're all going to be damage powers, and they're going to be the same level, but they're going to use different energies. So you'll be able to see how a damage power through the lens of physic is going to look different than through the lens of, say, mental energy. I decided to establish some basic guidelines to make sure that the powers were consistent. So they're all going to be level 20 damage powers, and I'm going to use a media effect for each one, sometimes a bonus, sometimes a penalty, but that gives you a little more control and flair over the style of the power. Let's take a look. To build these powers, I used our online system. If you go to the FNB Games website, click on the Builder button and log in, and over here under Abilities, you click on Powers. Along the left side here, you'll see Create a New Power, and that's how I built these. We've also got a YouTube video on how to create powers. I'll put that link in the description. Now, before we get into the main part of this video, I wanted to point out one thing that you might not be aware of if you haven't done a lot of power creation using the Beyonder system, and it's this here, page 164 of Science of the Sixth book, Special Weak Attributes. Now, generally speaking, to increase the attribute of a power by 1 step costs 2 extra levels to the power. So if you increase the range of a power from personal to touch, the level of the power increases by 2. But for emotion energy, if you're making a power using emotion energy, changing that range from personal to touch increases the first step by 4. So it's just a little more challenging for charismatics to have powers that affect things that are further away from themselves. Whereas for mental energy, that's not so bad, but they have trouble affecting a larger number of targets. So I just wanted to point that out and keep that in mind as I'm making these powers, that I either made a decision to go ahead with that, even though it's challenging for that power, or to avoid it to save levels and put the energy elsewhere. All right, so here's our first one. This is Luminous Burst. This is our physics power. As I said before, it just deals damage as its base effect. And for this one, I decided to make it a long-range AoE effect, so it's going to be middle range. 60 yards is pretty far away, and large group up to 9 targets. That's pretty solid. You can get a little bit higher, but this is only level 20, so there's still room to grow. I also put this medium effect of light +3. +3 is the biggest effect you can have for a media effect, and it either distracts or blinds your targets temporarily. So in addition to being seared by this intense light, your targets are going to have trouble recovering right away. So that'll give you a little extra advantage in a fight here. All right, the next one is our Soman power. It's called Plague of Boils, and body energy is the opposed energy to physics, so this will be a nice counterbalance to that last one. Again, it just deals damage as its base effect, but for this one, I wanted the feel of this to be your character runs into the middle of a melee, and right at the beginning they create this burst, which then distracts and damages their enemies for the rest of the fight. So I've got a range of touch, so you have to get much closer than the physic power for this one. But the target is medium group, so it still affects several enemies, and really if you're in a melee, 6 is probably enough to take care of just about any situation. The big difference is this duration of 1 hour. So the medium effect is disease, and again, it's +3. That's the biggest bonus you can have for a medium effect. And basically, the targets have these painful boils that give them a -2 penalty to their checks for the duration. So for an entire hour afterwards, that should include this fight, and if they survive and last longer than that, for a while afterwards, they're going to have trouble concentrating, which will give you an advantage over them for the entire duration and then some. And I just wanted to quickly point out, as I mentioned before, every energy has a weak attribute for body that is range. Some have trouble affecting people other than themselves, but for a damage power, you really want it to work on somebody other than yourself. So this is just sort of what you have to do when you're using a body attack power. Luckily, for the most part, Somen are tough enough to get up close to an enemy, so touch range will usually do it for you. Moving on, we've got our charismatic power, Scared to Death. Just as before, it just deals damage. This time it's inner damage instead of outer damage. But just like a Somen, charismatics have a weak attribute of range, which means it's hard for them to affect people at a long distance. They've really got to be up and close there to affect their emotions. So I did just touch. Once again, they got to get a little bit closer, which can sometimes be harder for a charismatic, but hopefully they can talk their way in close before they get hurt. Only affects a small group, and just like the body power, it does have a duration. But in this case, we've got a medium of fear, only a +2, which is still significant, but not quite as high as you can go. And basically, this is going to set them up. It's going to give a penalty for their enemies to resist fear. So they might start out this time using this scared to death power, do a little bit of damage, but then also make their enemies more susceptible to future attacks, assuming that they have other abilities that are also fear effects. One more thing to point out about the charismatic powers is that the base effect of dealing damage is a base effect level of 5 for charismatic, whereas for body and physic energy, it's a base effect of 0. So it might seem like these attributes are a little bit weaker than they were at the other two powers. That's because the baseline starting effect is at level 5. Next up, we have our Mentarch power. It's called Phantom Burns. Mental energy as opposed to emotion energy, so again, this will be a nice counterpoint. And similar to the charismatic power, dealing damage is not something that comes naturally to Mentarchs. In fact, it's even worse than with charismatics. The base effect is level 10. So of this level 20 power, half of that just comes from the base effect, which is why these numbers seem so low. The weak attribute is target for Mentarchs, so we're only targeting a single individual, and again, because we used up so much on the base effect, the range is going to be just touch. So you're going to have to be clever sneaking in close to your enemies to use this, or maybe it's that they came up to you and it's a reaction to getting a little too close. Defense mechanism here. Duration is 5 minutes, so let's take a look at the medium. This is sensory, so they're really going to feel the sensation of being burned, but we've only got a +1 here. A +1 generally means that the effect is not a system mechanical event. It's not the numbers are changed. It's more of a storytelling effect. So the target is going to believe that they've been badly burned, which means that they might choose to do something like jump into a nearby body of water, or they might run away to make sure that they are healed before they are injured worse. So this is a sort of effect that will be really dependent on you and your moderator to decide how to use this in a fun and effective way in your stories. All right, switching over from our inner energies to our ethereal energies. Next up, we've got the mystic power, Vampiric Gaze. Once again, we've got a similarity. The base effect of dealing damage, in this case it's ethereal damage, for a mystic, if it were against an undead creature, would be a level 0 effect, but because it's against a regular target, doing damage is level 10 base effect. So again, half of our power is used up by the base effect. So these numbers, again, are going to be pretty low. Target is, again, the weak attribute for mystics, so it's only going to affect one individual, but we've got a range of close, so you've got a little more space between you and your enemies, so a little bit of a safer range, and duration is instant, so we didn't waste anything on that. Our medium is going to be life. Again, we're just going to do a +1 bonus, so generally this is a smaller effect, so the user is going to heal 1 fatigue, so as they're doing damage, they're going to heal themselves. Not of wounds, but they're going to give themselves a little bit of a pep, so offset the drain that activating the power will cause. And last up, we have our Umbrous Power Pestilential Burst. Shadow is opposed to spirit energy, but unlike spirit, dealing damage is something that Umbrists do well. So this is a base effect of 0, and you'll notice that I've had a lot more wiggle room here to bring up some of these levels. Biggest one here, magnitude of 10, so it's much more likely that you'll be able to get that moderate, major, or maybe even a complete success on your roll. Duration is the weak attribute for Umbrists, so getting this 5 minutes cost me 4 levels, but I had the levels, so why not? It affects a small group and a range touch. So what I'm imagining for this power is your Umbrist, maybe very agile and good at getting around, runs into a small group, does this burst, gives a little damage, but also, if you look down here, the medium effect, they're going to get a penalty to their athletics check. So maybe this is a situation where you run in, do a little damage, and then you run out, and you're being chased by your enemies, but now they've got this penalty, so you're even better at getting away. So maybe this is a distraction technique, or maybe you're just tiring them out while your allies get healed up, or something like that. And there you have it. Hopefully that gives you some idea of what we mean when we say how customizable Beyonder is, and also gives you a feel of the different energies, which ones are good at doing damage, which ones are not, and how you could take the same base effect and make it look really different. In a lot of games, damage is just damage, but in Beyonder, it really can manifest in very different ways. Now, you may have noticed that I'm wearing a new Beyonder shirt, but that's not the only new thing we have in the world of Beyonder. We've got a little bit of Beyonder. This is our newest book. It includes Sally, a short adventure for you to try out, as well as an abbreviated set of the rules. It's got some excerpts from the bestiary, as well as pre-made characters, and pretty much everything you need to get started in the world if you're new to Beyonder. I'm not going to show you what's inside. You're going to have to find it out for yourself. So I'll put a link below. Go check it out. Otherwise, give us a like if you like this video. Give us a comment if you want to hear more lists of things that we can do in Beyonder, if you want to see more customizability, or if you just want to let us know what you think. See you next time.